There is no such thing as toxic masculinity. You see, the world that we exist in right now, especially this modern society, the powers that be seek to destroy masculinity. Why? Because the only group in history to ever overthrow tyrannical governments are military aged men that believe in God, that are in touch with their virtuous masculinity. There is no such thing as toxic masculinity. And the reason this phrase has become all the rage in recent times is because the powers that be, this weird, weak, soft modern society, seeks to destroy masculinity because masculinity is not easily controlled. Because what group in history has overthrown tyrannical governments? It is military aged men that believe in God, that are virtuous, that are in touch with their masculinity. It's that group. So, of course, the powers that be, the tyrannical government, the modern society, of course, seeks to subvert masculinity, to suppress masculinity, because it's not easily controlled. It's a force to be reckoned with for good. And the more that men are controlled and become docile, it's easier for them to sink their talons into our backs and control us through every means necessary. That's why there's such a barrage of dopamine and pornography and cheap food and cheap entertainment and social media seeking to subvert the masculine energy. See, the same traits that you could apply to toxic masculinity, you could apply to toxic femininity just as well. Guys, I don't know if it takes just me to say it, but there's nothing wrong with being aggressive if it's under control. There's nothing wrong with being dominant if it's under control. There's nothing wrong with being stoic so long as you are able to feel your emotions but not allow them to control you. You know, our society has become so fallen that we live in an age where when a man identifies as a woman, if he becomes transgender, he's not a woman, by the way. Okay, that's a controversial thing to say nowadays, but it's not controversial because that's the truth. And if you're a man that says, nope, I do not want to have sex with another man, that somehow that is homophobic and transphobic. Everything is a phobia. It's all a farce, guys. It's all a psyop, okay? It's all a psyop meant to destroy and confuse, okay? So what is the enemy? What does Satan want? He wants to kill, destroy, and confuse. He is the father of destruction and confusion and chaos. And so when things become confused and inverted and chaotic, we don't really know up from down, left from right, the truth from falsehood. And so we need more voices becoming courageous, speaking out into these particular outlets, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, speaking again about the truth. And I see an uprising of men. It's a very positive thing that's happening right now, is that there's Christian men everywhere, myself included. They're starting to shout from the rooftops that all of this stuff is bullcrap. None of this stuff is true. And specifically pertaining to toxic masculinity, we need to bring masculinity back, not invert it, because we live in a gynocentric matriarchal society right now. And look at what's happening as a result. There's just destruction. Suicide rates among men are at an all-time high. Divorce rates are at an all-time high. You know, women are becoming increasingly older and childless and marriageless, and they're becoming boss babes, and they're essentially becoming men. You see, masculine traits are championed when they're displayed by women. But when masculine traits are displayed by men, it's toxic. You see, this is a psyop, guys. Don't buy into this crap. You don't need to be in touch with your feminine side. In fact, there's no such thing as a feminine side in a man. A well-integrated, calibrated man experiences the full breadth and spectrum of emotions, but he does not allow those emotions to control him. His feet are firmly planted on the ground. He's got his rational faculties about him. Sometimes he does have to cry. There's a time and place for that. Sometimes he does have to be angry, righteous anger. There's a time and place and context for that. But at the center of masculinity is control, right? It's being the stoic man under pressure, right? When things become chaotic, then a man's equanimity, his ability to stay calm under duress, that is masculinity. That is what the world needs more than ever. We need men that are questioning things and aggressively questioning things and saying, why are you attacking me? I'm a good man that's also capable of being a man. See, those things are now have become mutually exclusive things. A good man is capable of violence but keeps it under control. See, this is one thing I don't agree with a lot of what Jack Donovan says, but what he says about being a good man and being good at being a man and how those are two separate things, very, very true. A good man is a nice guy, all of those nice guy traits. But what doesn't make him effective at being a man is that he's not capable of violence. He's not capable of being the monster, but has that under control. Jordan Peterson talks about that a lot, and a lot of his clips that have gone completely viral is that a man must possess both those good traits, those typically virtuous traits, but also the aggressive traits, the good at being a man traits. Because one could say, convicts, people that have done violent crimes, I'm talking violent crimes, I'm not talking about any of that sexual stuff or abuse or anything like that, but particularly violent crimes. Those guys are manly, they're masculine dudes, but they're not very good men. Now, when you marry both, you become the biblical man. The Bible teaches us not to be docile, weak, hippies. Okay, the Bible doesn't teach us to be, see the whole concept of turn the other cheek. The whole world has gotten completely wrong what that even means. Okay, that doesn't mean just take crap. It means take the high road when necessary, but when needed, you defend and you fight. Okay, these same toxic traits that they assign to men are championed in women, and more men need to realize and wake up to the fact that this is all a psyop. What I recommend all men do is get their heads in the Bible, become studied, faithful, spiritually strong warriors, get their bodies into a gym where they're gripping the steel and putting their bodies through the motion of barbell training that reconnects a man with the toil of being a man, right? It reconnects a man with the desire to grip the broadsword and go into battle. See, we live in an insulated and very comfortable society, so we need to recreate that work. A man needs to get himself in a martial arts dojo so he knows how to defend himself and the ones around him when another man is trying to impose his will upon him. And a man's heart needs brotherhood. He needs the wise counsel of men around him to call him out and to give him accountability, love, and heat when required. When a man does all three of those things, he becomes a more masculine man. Not a toxic man. He becomes a more masculine man. There's no such thing as toxic masculinity, guys. I'm going to say it out loud, too, for all the married men out there. I rarely, if ever, change a diaper. I don't wash the dishes, and I don't know how to use my washer and dryer. A lot of people nowadays will call that toxic masculinity. No, that's called being a man, because I stick to my man duties within the home and outside the home, and my wife sticks to her female duties and female duties inside and outside of the home. There's nothing toxic about a well-ordered household, guys. There's nothing toxic about patriarchy, because patriarchy means a man is submitted to God and his order and his authority first. And then from there, his wife is submitted to him, and then their children are submitted to them. That is the order of the family. Patriarchy only becomes toxic. Masculinity only becomes toxic when a man is not submitted to the authority above him. Because men, the fallen creatures that we are, just like women are fallen creatures because we're fallen creatures as humans in general, if we are not submitted to a higher authority, it leads to tyranny. So one could say that is toxic, sure. But when a man is faithful, committed to God, and submitted to God, downstream from that, he gets that godly authority. He is able to wield that leadership. He is able to guide and lead and guard his home, right? So before anybody tells you that you're toxic for speaking a certain way, for being bold and for being courageous, for being aggressive when it's needed, for being dominant when it's needed, for being forthright, for being outspoken. We don't have enough outspoken men that are planting their flags in the ground and saying, this is where I stand, this is where I am, this is who I am, and I'm not compromising that for anybody but God. There is a true absence of godly masculinity. And so when there's an absence of godly masculinity, you get this fake parading masculinity, right? You see, look at all these guys in the red pill space. And I hate saying this guy's name over and over again. You get Andrew Tate's the pinnacle of this, right? It's the pinnacle of masculinity in the modern world, because men have fallen so far away from the true ordered masculinity that comes from the Bible, Jesus being the masculine ideal. I don't care what anybody says. That man was and is the masculine ideal for many, 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 many reasons. And it's completely different from the modern day Andrew Tate type of masculinity that wants to drive Bugattis, that wants to bed all of these baddies and make all of this money for seemingly no reason and have children with multiple women. Yeah, that's not masculinity, because that's not control. There's no restraint there, right? A key component of masculinity is restraint. So being the monster, but keeping it under control, being the man that has options to sleep with a bunch of women, but chooses not to, chooses to commit his life to one woman. The man that is capable of great violence, the man is capable of buying what he wants, but chooses not to for a greater purpose. You see, the greatest example of this restraint is when Jesus was being led up to that cross. He did so willingly for our salvation. He could have, with the blink of an eye, destroyed all of his enemies while being led up to that cross, but didn't. That restraint is powerful. And that's what's missing. A man with no restraint, a man with no faith, a man with no authority above him that he's submitted to, that is when a man becomes toxic. And that is what you see nowadays, these caricatures of masculinity that are not true examples of masculinity. So guys, I could talk about this endlessly, but it's time that men keep their heads in the Bible, but look up and look at themselves in the mirror and ask themselves, what kind of a man am I showing up like? Am I the weak, docile, typical Christian man that not vilified, but gets made fun of? Or am I a bold apostle like Paul was, who stood before royalty, stood before kings and proclaimed the Bible, the good news of the gospel? That kind of bold masculinity, the masculinity that is meant to stand in the gap between good and evil. Because if good men don't stand in the gap between good and evil, that is when tyrannical, toxic men fill that gap. Good, strong, faithful men should be willing to walk into hell covered in ashes to protect their environment, their family, their city, their communities, the people that exist around them, their neighbors. That is true masculinity, not what you see right now with the flashy cars and the watches and the big houses and having sex with multiple women. That's not masculinity. But that's not toxic masculinity either. So don't buy into this psyop. It's just fallen masculinity, because the same traits that can be applied to toxic men, you can apply to toxic women as well, because they're no different. Modern women are acting like men, and modern men are acting like women. And it's about time that we change that.